Speaker's Corner aboard the Villa Vie Odyssey, hosted by Kit Cassingham.
Good evening, Odyssey residents. Welcome to Speaker's Corner. This is our third to the last presentation for the year, and on the last one I'll tell you how many we've had for the year. So I've had people asking me, so maybe I should start a raffle. Of course there's no prizes, but anyway. We also have our AV director working. This is Petter. This is the residents. Oh, and there's Lauren. No Kelly right now, but anyway. Okay. So Gill Cross is going to yet again entertain and educate us. Now, I haven't been able to decide if she's going to teach us English or swear words. But it might be the same thing, but we'll find out. And she's warned me, and I'll warn you. She may not have enough time for all the slides, and that means she's going to be back for part 2. Yay! So with that, Jill, would you teach us something from the Dictionary of the Vulgar Tongue?
Well, I'm glad Pip has warned you that we may have a part 2, but what she really ought to have warned you about is the fact this is going to be spicy. And so later, we're going to have all sorts of rudeness, and there might even be a C-bomb. So for our American friends, who I know find that really offensive, forgive me. But it will only happen once, and it will be in sort of jest, but actually to do with historical literature. Anyway, so we progress onwards with the Dictionary of the Vulgar Tongue. I came across this particular tome about 5 years ago, and it was the most extraordinary thing that I'd seen. It really made me chortle, and I'm hoping there will be some chortles and some guffaws. And I'm already aware that because I'm excited about this, my speech is speeding up, and I know and I know that's very difficult sometimes for people to understand. So I'm going to endeavour to slow down, and you Brits in the front just do a and then I will know that I'm speaking too fast for our colleagues. Anyway, here we are, the Dictionary of the Vulgar Tongue, and here is a fellow who actually got the Dictionary of the Vulgar Tongue about, and I will explain how it came about, but I just want you to look at this portly fellow, i.e. this chubby chap, Mr. Francis Gross, which I think is actually quite an apt name for this fellow. And he began to look at this classical Dictionary of the Vulgar Tongue in 1785, and then he looked again in 1788. But what we're going to look at, and this is very important, because I am very interested in scholarship and actually having absolute clarity in terms of scholarship and where sources are coming from. We're looking at the Dictionary of the Vulgar Tongue, which is in 1811, which is his latest edition of this. And this is actually on Project Gutenberg. And if you don't know Project Gutenberg, then it is a really, really good website which allows you to download anything, well, many things that are out of copyright. So it's really, really good. Okay, so how did this come about? Well, this fellow here is a guy called Samuel Johnson. And Samuel Johnson spent 7 years working out a dictionary. So there was this understanding that printing had come upon and that people were understanding language, and they wanted to understand the English language in particular, and this is very UK based. So we'll talk about the Americas later, but for the moment we're absolutely based in the UK. So he published this in 1755, and you'll notice that there's some time lag before the Vulgar Tongue came out. And essentially the Vulgar Tongue comes about from the fact that there were words that were not accepted in the dictionary that Samuel Johnson wrote, but they were words at the time. So there were words that people were using that meant something, and they have some real historical integrity that we should be very mindful of. So here we have Samuel Johnson. If you're at all interested in British humour, we have a programme called Blackadder, which is some years old now. But in Blackadder III, which is essentially the Regency, so after George III, Potato George, the guy who lost us the Americas, gained you the Americas, his son, he went mad, and his son came on as the Prince Regent for 10 years or so. And in Blackadder III, Ink and Incapability, it's on YouTube, and it's about this business about dictionaries, because as you can imagine, getting a dictionary together is very difficult to do. And so Samuel Johnson, as I said, spent 7 years putting together this dictionary. Now he has an amazing legacy, this fellow. He had so much scholarship in his own time. He was really respected. This wasn't the only thing that he wrote about. He was most extraordinary. And he was so important in his own time that he was actually buried in Westminster Abbey. And for those who don't know about Westminster Abbey, it's one of the most important churches in the United Kingdom. It began in 1066, obviously after the William the Conqueror conquest. It has seen the coronation of 40 monarchs, including the very recent monarch sovereignty coronation of Charles III. But it was also Henry VIII had his coronation there. Elizabeth I had a coronation there, and so it's a very, very important place. Now, I've been to Westminster Abbey on many an occasion, and actually I felt quite, I don't know, sentimental, I suppose, around about this time, because what I often try to do is they have a kind of raffle for getting in to see some of the services. Now, I'm not religious at all, I'm a total atheist, but what I do like to do is listen to the music, and I like the pomp and ceremony of cathedrals. And so certainly for the past few years, I've been lucky enough to get into Westminster Abbey and listen to their services. Anywho, the thing that I find most important about Westminster Abbey is actually this, which is Poets' Corner. And Poets' Corner is quite interesting because it is a part of London history whereby writers were actually lionised in their own time or lionised after their death, and they were interred here. And so Poets' Corner is actually in the UK, in Westminster Abbey, we have this idea of people being interred. Now, if you're a bit scared that we haven't done any scandalous beastliness yet, forgive me, there's scholarship to begin with and then some beastliness afterwards. So here we have Poets' Corner here. You can see there, right, hang fire, you can see it there, there you go. So we can see this is just a small amount of the transept there with various poets there. Here is Dickens' grave, but Dickens is actually buried here. Here's the Lord Byron, mad, bad, and dangerous to know. He was an absolute shocker. His behaviour was so disgraceful that he actually had to flee the United Kingdom and live abroad. And in part of that, we were very, very lucky because that meant that he went off with Percy Bysshe Shelley and Mary Shelley, and Frankenstein, the novel, came out of that. So we're very lucky about that. However, Byron was an absolute cad and a beast. And this is his half-sister, Alexa. And he actually fathered a child with her, which was then, she was then sent to a nunnery. So that's how much of a beast that Byron is. Anyway, he's in Poets' Corner, as we should always respect these people with their good moral compasses. And here we have Thomas Hardy. And Thomas Hardy, I've taught a lot of him in literature. He's a very interesting guy. Look at how long he lived. So he was born in 1840, so at the beginning, or like the best part of the Victorian Empire, and then he lived until 1928. Now he had a very problematic issue in terms of where he was going to be buried. So because he was so respected in his time, this is his most famous novel. So this is Tess of the D'Urbervilles. It's a really lovely, lovely novel. This is Gemma Arterton in a BBC adaptation. Something, if you are at all interested, this is so beautiful to watch. She's absolutely gorgeous, and Hardy's writing is phenomenal. Anyway, he had this issue whereby he had split loyalty between his place in Dorset, where he loved and where he was brought up, and also this prestige of being buried in Poets' Corner. So he did no more than have somebody cut out his heart, burn the rest of his carcass. His ashes are buried in Poets' Corner, and his heart is buried in Dorset. So quite an interesting, gruesome story there. Anywho, here we go to the Dictionary of the Vulgar Tongue, and here we have Francis Grose. He's a very interesting fellow because he decided that actually there was a lot of language that was not being used in dictionaries, and dictionaries were very highbrow. So we just talked about Samuel Johnson. He was such an important fellow. He's buried in Westminster Abbey, and yet somehow or other, lots of London is not being, and in fact the United Kingdom is not being represented by what is going on in the dictionary. So he had this guy called Tom Cockcroft, which is a useful name. They lurked around Covent Garden taverns, and they were listening to soldiers and sailors and ne'er-do-wells and prostitutes and all this kind of old caper. And they brought up all this slang that people were using. So the slang is partly just disgusting stuff, but it's also partly a historical sort of a historical dictionary of what people were thinking at what time and why they were thinking about it. Now, as I said earlier, and Kit spoke about earlier, there's so much richness here that I couldn't do too much in terms of historical context. So you'll just have to bear with me and we'll do what we can. But here he is, good old fellow. And these are things that he then went about to do this dictionary of the Vulgar tongue. And he, as I said, he did it in the 1700s, and he wanted to bring to the forefront this language that may or may not be lost later. And these are things that are, is this working? Yeah. Okay, so these are things, some of the areas that are covered. So justice and punishment, that's a really, really big deal. And don't get too excited about that, because that's going to be part 2. Ditto, part 2. Sex, we're on for that one. Poverty, part 2. Stereotypes, part 2. Drunkenness, possibility. Prostitution, part 2. And venereal diseases, definitely part 3. So anyway, what I want to do before we get onto the right saucy stuff is some of the stuff that really made me laugh when I first picked up this dictionary of the Vulgar tongue. Now, here is one of the things that we can look at. It's called the Admiral of the Narrow Seas. So this dictionary has both words and it has phrases. So this is a phrase, Admiral of the Narrow Seas. And we might ponder what that actually means. Well, get ready. It means this: one who from drunkenness vomits into the lap of the person sitting opposite to him. Most extraordinary. And as luck would have it, Francis Gross has told us it's a sea phrase. That's mostly what sailors do. And in, obviously, Britain is an island, and so we've got lots of seafaring history. If you look at Shakespeare and lots of other poetry, we have all sorts of seafaring metaphors that come through, and seafaring histories that come through. So here we have this I'll just go back there. Oh, hang fire. Admiral of the Narrow Seas is drunk aglow. And then we go the Vice Admiral of the Narrow Seas. I wonder what this fellow could be doing. Well, surprisingly, a man that pisses under the table into his companion's shoes. I would suggest to you, don't go on the narrow seas. You may come a cropper. Anyway, so here we have, again, a Scotch warming pan. And we might so Scotch means Scottish, it's a kind of slang word just for the Scottish themselves. A Scotch warming pan. And here we have, a wench, and also a fart. What else would it be? Warming us with a fart. Now, this is one for you American people over the pond. And this is the word pumpkin. Now, this is an archaic spelling of the word pumpkin. Right, I'll just remind you of the War of Independence, where poor old Farmer George lost us, you blighters, and here it is. A man or woman of Boston, of course, Boston very firm in terms of of all sorts of good things. So, a man or woman of Boston in America, from the number of pumpkins raised and eaten by the people of that country. This is basically the British taking the piss out of you. So you're just basically pumpkin eaters. Let's hear no more about you. And Pumpkinshire is Boston and its dependencies. So we'll just go a bit further and say that you're all just pumpkins.
As if that mattered.
Agreed, Cindy. Right, now this one, you can now take the piss out of the British. All right, this one is park paling. Okay, park paling. What the crikey could that mean? Well, it means British teeth. And so here we have the Simpsons talking about the fact that we, unlike you, have terrible gnashers. So that really made me giggle. And this is actually much more to do with what the religious and philosophical and misogynistic nonsense was going on at the time. This is the word ape leader. What's it mean? An old maid, i.e. somebody who's never married, somebody who's a virgin. Their punishment after death for neglecting, increase and multiply will be, it is said, leading apes into hell. So if you are a single woman and you are a virgin, you have not done what your duty is, which is to procreate, go forth and procreate, and so therefore you're going to be called an ape leader, and you will be, your punishment is to lead apes into hell. And so we should remember these kind of like gender issues that are going on at this time, and other issues that are going on at this time on a serious note. Anywho, here we go, get men's genitals. Alrighty, so here we got the penis book. So we're going to begin with the penis, and gents, if you need to know anything about your penis, you could go to this, this proper tome, the scholarly tome. We know that by the emoji, that it has the aubergine. so we know it's a scholarly thing. It tells you a doctor's complete guide to the penis. If you need to know it, I can give it to you later. So there we go. So let's have a look at this first one, sugar stick. Sugar stick. I think this might be written by a man.
Yeah, you think?
Because it is the virile member. So, sweet, succulent, the virile member. There you go. Then, let's have a look at piss proud. What could that possibly mean? Well, having a false erection, you fellows. That old fellow thought he had an erection, but his was only piss proud, said of any old fellow who marries a young wife. So let that be a caution, you piss proud men. Let that be a caution to you. So, organ. So we might think, well, yes, we know what an organ is, but do we? A pipe. Will you cock your organ? Will you smoke your pipe? So in this sense, the organ is not actually about your penis, it's about your pipe and smoking it, which some men might think is more important. Okay, this is nice, whore pipe. So who thinks what's going on here in terms of the attitudes towards women? The penis, the whore pipe, of course it is. Here we have plug tail, a man's penis. Plug tail, so tail in this sense means the vagina or the bottom. It's plugging it up, that's what that means. And here we have lobcock, gird your loins chaps. A large relaxed penis, also a dull inanimate fellow. I think I'd rather know the dull inanimate fellow. Okay, so these are other ones that we don't have time to talk to too much. So we have the well hung. We still use that today. Now this is what the this is actually all of this is verbatim what is in the dictionary. The Blauen was nuts upon the kiddie because he is well hung, which means the girl is pleased with the youth because his genitals are large. So there you go. Thomas Mann, so we would call it John Thomas in the UK. I don't know what you would call it in America, but we would call it John Thomas, but it's still around today. Man Thomas, a man's penis. Tools, we would call it a tool, or we would say you are a tool, not sure which. And those are the private parts of a man. And then we get some good old Latin here, which I know Catherine would be interested in. So arbor vitae, it's an evergreen tree, a man's penis. So there's a suggestion of this virality or virility of a man's penis. So now we're going to go on to the testicles and unexpectedly the scrotum. Now one of the things I did not expect to see or contemplate was the idea of a scrotum. I thought the scrotum was just a sort of wrinkly sack. Anywho, here we get whirligigs. Get ready, fellas. Whirligigs, testicles, bollocks. Okay, wrong spelling, so the spelling has obviously come forward with us. But interestingly, the testicles of a man or a beast, and there's a lot of man and beasting going on in this dictionary of the vulgar tongue. I'm not sure you men are that beast-like, but possibly. Also, a vulgar nickname for a parson. So what we do have is a lot of religious beastliness going on here. There's a lot of problems about religious people. So basically it's saying that the parson is a load of old bollocks. His brains are in his buttocks, a cant saying to designate a fool. Now, the word cant has different meanings. So sometimes it can mean hypocritical, but in this case it actually means the cant means what people are saying at that time and what their meaning is at that time. So when it says cant, that's what it means. So essentially if you're saying somebody is buttocks, they are a fool. Okay, twiddle-dills, testicles, twiddle-dills. Got any twiddle-dilling about? I don't know. Nutmegs, not unexpected. That's now a footballing phrase in the UK. Nutmegging, is it not? Yeah, going between the legs, yes? Yep. Yeah. Okay, so perplexing times with the male scrotum. So now we really have to concentrate. So I had to do a resident consultation appertaining to Scrotum Gate 2025 on this because it was so unexpected to me. Here we have it, whiffles. A relaxation of the scrotum. Now, I was quite perplexed by this. Do people relax and tighten up their scrotum? I was really surprised. So I had to ask some people. So I'm going to say thanks to Clarky, Jim Mars, Dave Shogan, Steve Roberts, and Sharon Roberts. What I would say to you is this. I asked him about this business about scrotums. Clarky said he didn't have one. Jim Moss smiled beautifully and said yes, he could relax his. Dave Shogan, a scholarly fellow, said What do you mean it's an organ? Steve Roberts said he had to go and ask advice. So Sharon Roberts helped him out there. She said, yeah, she wasn't sure he could manage to relax his scrotum, but she could help him with that. Anyway, the fact of the matter is, I did not get a proper Odyssey answer to this business of the scrotum. So I went to the captain. And I asked him,
No, you didn't.
what is going on with your scrotum? You know, can you relax it or not? And he said, young woman, if I were to relax my scrotum, we would all be doomed. Anyway, what I really realised was, for fuck's sake, what should I have done? Asked Ellie and Jim. Ellie and Rick. Asked Ellie and Rick about that. But the trouble is, Rick's always too careful with his sugar stick. So, can't manage it. Okay, so just as I thought Scrotum Gate was out of the water and we didn't have to worry about it, I went back to the dictionary and I came across this fellow, the Rantalian. One whose scrotum is so relaxed as to be longer than his penis, i.e., whose shot pouch, i.e., his balls, is longer than the barrel of his piece. Now, I'm not going to do a poll, a proper WhatsApp poll about this, or any measurements. But if you know this is you, you're amongst friends. All right, so now we go to miscellaneous. Beard splitter. A man much given to wenching. Now, I'm going to speak about the term wench. So wench has a really interesting historical time with us. So essentially, it's been used since the 1300s. It used to mean something quite banal, like, a lady who's around and about, doesn't really care much about it. And then it had various kind of different things that happened with it. It's used in Shakespearean time, so I know it from Shakespeare. So, and I know it to mean actually a buxom wench. So somebody who's interesting, who is sexually attractive, somebody who's possibly young, and all that business. And but around about now, when we're talking about in the 1800s, it actually means somebody of loose morality. And what a surprise! Women with loose morals. Who knew? Who knew that would be an accusation against us? What was interesting to me is, so I know this dictionary back to front really, but because I was doing this talk for you, I wanted to just check some of my facts, and I was looking at the history of the word wenching. And what I hadn't realised is that in the Americas, it became actually a really problematic racial slur in terms of slavery later on. So that was interesting and something a lesson that I have learned. Okay, metal. Right, get ready. The seaman. To fetch metal, the act of self-pollution. So self-pollution is obviously masturbation. Metal is also figuratively used for courage. And interestingly, Ophelia in Hamlet is there's a suggestion that she has some metal, because she's always portrayed as this very weak-willed woman, because she kills herself, and because she's enamored with Hamlet, and Hamlet's so strong and he ignores her and all that kind of stuff. But actually, she's quite a strong-willed woman at the beginning, and she's quite interesting as a female character because of that. However, despite her metal, she does kill herself, and a very sad thing. Right, toss off. I don't think we really have to worry too much about this, because I think it's something that we would know about. And of course it is that manual pollution. Interestingly, in the UK we would call somebody a tosser as a term of like, you're a just absolute bloody tosser. I don't know if you do in the US, but we would certainly not have too many concerns about saying that to somebody. Okay, so now we come to women's genitals, and it's quite interesting in terms of the kind of power balance that's going on here. So here we're going to begin with the breasts, and interestingly, there's not that much about breasts in the dictionary. There's much more about the vagina. So at that time, there were many, many more conversations about the vagina than there were about the breasts. Just as an aside, I'd like to thank you all for coming. I can see that there are quite a few of you in the room, and I'm really pleased about that. And I'm kind of pondering why that is, because I didn't get that many for Victorian art. Did I? I think maybe it was because they were like 25 scuba divers off the ship, or maybe it's a topic, who knows. Anyway.
We're a dirty bunch.
Yeah, I know Randy.
Call me Randy again.
Alright, so here we've got the apple dumpling shop. a woman's bosom. Here we have kettle drums. Now this is quite interesting because Cupid's kettle drums, a woman's breast called by sailors chest and bedding. And there's quite a bit of stuff going on with sailors, because sailors are obviously pretty lonely people out there, and they are pretty on their own. And as an aside, one of the things that's missing in this dictionary is there is very little about homosexuality. So there are some things about effeminate men, and there are some things about calling somebody a sodomite, but there is very little about homosexuality. And what that tells us, interesting, clearly it's illegal, clearly it's socially unacceptable, clearly on ships it happened, we all know that. But what it suggests to us is that at this time that the vulgar tongue was not vulgar enough to actually look at men on men love. Okay, right, we'll go on to the vagina. Okay, now this is hilarious. So this is at. And the answer is old hat. So they haven't even bothered to use the H there. They've dropped the H, it's an at. So old hat, a woman's privities, because frequently felt. I don't know, ladies, have we been lucky enough? Not sure. Okay, merkin. This staggered me. Counterfeit hair for women's privy parts. I went into a kind of reverie of what? What? How does this work? How did they stick it on? That's what I want to know. There's no glue. I mean, what is it? Some animal hair that you just fling on and hope for the best? I don't know. Most extraordinary. Anyway, there you go. If you want a merkin, I've got some for sale in my cabin. Okay, here we have quim. Now, quim is a really interesting word because it's clearly an old English word. And I had to get my good friend Catherine down to talk to me about this, because quim is used in Chaucer. So the private parts of a woman, perhaps from the Spanish quimar, to burn, Cambridge, look at this, a piece's, i.e. a woman's, fur below. So that's a woman's fur below. Yeah, is a quim. Now, interestingly, in Chaucer, which was written in the late 1300s up until 1400, bloody hell, the 1400s, he used to use this word here, quaint, and that is the word that I asked Catherine to come and just check my pronunciation on, because when I've taught Chaucer, we always use the word quim. Now, quim is a lesser, it means vagina, but it's a lesser problem here, whereas quaint actually means cunt. So there's the C-bomb, it's out, it's all done. Has anybody left? I'm not sure. I'm not sure. But it also means cunning and beastliness, and it has much more. And you kind of get this idea of how women are viewed. And it's viewed that they use their sexuality as cunningness and to persuade people and to get what they want. So thank you, Catherine, for coming down and talking countries with me. That's very good. Yes. Okay, so this is a bizarre one. I don't know where the history of this comes from. A madge, private parts of a woman. It's obviously something of that time. I did quite a bit of Googling and lurking around in old manuscripts. Couldn't find anything for it. I suspect it's some woman who's been considered to be a loose woman of some description. So anyway, there we go. Now we get to the more problematic words that mean a woman's vagina. Here we've got monosyllable. So a monosyllable, it's of no worth to us. One syllable is all we're going to talk about. Vagina has 3 syllables. So very bizarre here that we have this monosyllable. And here we also have the description as a woman's commodity. And so what we can also see is what Mr. Gross, with his big tummy, is talking about is that women's sexuality is a commodity, and it's a commodity that you can be bought and sold and used. So it's really interesting that this is just this random description of what this word means, or definition, should I say, of what this word means, and it is a commodity, something you can buy and sell. Now, muff is something that we still use today, and I have great joy in using the word muff in a different manner to say that you've muffed it, which is a very, very sort of 1900s and 1920s British word, saying you've made a muff, you've made a mistake. And I always use the word muff for a mistake. It really makes me laugh because it upends this stuff about the muff. Now, if you think about the muff and you think about a muff where you have a furry thing and you put your hands in and that kind of thing, that's kind of what we're looking at here. So anyway, here we are. The private parts of a woman to the well wearing of your muff, mort. Now mort means woman, and it's a derogatory term to a woman. But this, they've also given us the proper English to it. To the happy consummation of your marriage, girl, a health. So this is actually a toast on a wedding day. To the private parts of you to have a happy day on your wedding day. So that's pretty amusing. And then we have notch. Now again, problematic. Notch on bedposts is a notch. What are you doing? Are you counting? Are you tallying? What's going on with sexual favours? Bloody hell. Private parts of a woman. What a surprise. And then we have wear. A woman's wear, her commodity. So again, this is this idea of what women's sexuality is worth. Now, we're going to get on to sexual intercourse, and here we've got a proper pen and ink engraving of the London sex workers in the 1700s, and you can see there's all sorts of beastliness going on here. We've got a corset going on there. He's drunk as a lord, she's fondling him, she's in disarray. There's all sorts of shenanigans going on here. Okay, so occupy, wowzers. To occupy a woman, to have carnal knowledge of her, you're essentially occupying her body. Your penis is setting up store in her body and you are occupying her. Really, really problematic. Shag, we know this one, but let's have a look at what they're saying at this point. To copulate, he is but bad shag, he is no able woman's man. So, gents, if you are not an able woman's man, no good for you. Alrighty, so beast with two backs. Now, this I know really well because it comes from Othello, and I've taught Othello quite a few times. Now, if you don't know about Othello, essentially it's one of his Shakespeare's tragedies, and Othello is a Moor, M-O-O-R, which means he comes from North Africa, meaning Morocco. And you can see here that he is depicted as a sort of more of an Arabic, sort of Turkish sultan kind of fellow. These days he's very much depicted as a much darker skinned black man who has West Indian or African, Southern African characteristics. Now, Othello is a very interesting fellow because he's a very, very good soldier. And he goes into Venice and he has massive currency because he is a very, very good soldier. And so therefore he is useful to the Venetians, who have a lot of pomp and ceremony and not very good at fighting. But he's a man of colour. And so he's always treated with distrust when he comes in there because he is a man of colour. They don't want him in Venetian society at all. But they're kind of doing this kind of dance with the devil where actually he's going to be quite useful to him. But then he does the worst thing, is that he marries Desdemona, and we can see there that she is a white woman. And then what happens is there is this, Shakespeare has this way of depicting Othello. He talks about his eyes rolling backwards, so the whites of his eyes, so there's this kind of racist thing about black skin and white eyes and that sort of thing. But the worst thing that he does is that he has a male gaze on a white woman, and that is problematic, very, very problematic. And what that means is that he is going to have some sort of a downfall, because that is not acceptable in Elizabethan England at all. And so what happens is Iago, supposedly his right-hand fellow, comes and starts whispering in his ear all these things that make Othello very, very jealous, and ultimately he murders Desdemona, and of course she pays, the woman pays, as we always do. So anyway, but the fact of the matter is, Beast with Two Backs comes straight from Othello, and one of the things about Shakespeare is that a lot of his stuff, despite the fact it wasn't in writing, people only seeing it on stage and listening to it, it becomes part of common parlance. And it's common parlance that we now have ourselves. We don't necessarily say beast with two backs, we certainly say a lot of other Shakespearean English. So here we are, I have a man and woman in the act of copulation. Knock. Okay, now we would say you might knock off a woman. We'd say that in the UK, I don't know if you say it in other parts of the world. She's knocking him off, he's knocking her off, that kind of caper. Anyway, to knock a woman, to have carnal knowledge of her, to knock off, to conclude. But this is what's important here, this business here. The phrase is borrowed from a blacksmith, to knock under, to submit. And so there's a real problem there going on with a power dynamic between men and women if there's an expectation that women are always going to submit. Okay, This is this is quite a good one. So riding St George. So I'll just remind you that St George is the patron saint of England. So we have 4 patron saints in the UK. We've got St David, who is the patron saint of Wales. We've got St Patrick, patron saint of Ireland. Of course, that's why people are called Paddies. You've got St Andrews, the patron saint of Scotland, and St George is the patron saint of England. And what St George is very famous for is that he slayed a dragon. And he slayed a dragon because this dragon was part of this community, and the dragon needed to be fed, and so the villagers were giving him all their sheep and whatnot. And then finally they ran out of sheep, and so what did he want? Well, he wanted human sacrifice, so they gave him a load of human sacrifice. And then after that, he wanted a princess, and so the princess was going, and St George, well, George as he was then, he was not beatified. He came along and he said, actually, I'll do something about this. And then he was very masculine and he slayed the dragon. Now, interestingly, St George, we, in the UK, we think of him as a very much an English saint, but he isn't. You can go back to the 5th century and you can see him all over Europe, this idea of this guy with the dragons. And if you're a Game of Thrones person, the chap who wrote Game of Thrones was a very, very clever fellow, and he did a lot of history and research about things, and that is partly why dragons are so important in the Game of Thrones, because they have so much history, which is bizarre because they never existed. But anyway, let's have a look at what it actually means. Well, the woman uppermost in the amorous congress, she's on top, she's riding this fellow. That is the dragon upon St George. So obviously the dragon is down there now, but previously he was up there. This is said to be the way to get a bishop. So I think this is lazy men deciding that in order to get a bishop or a child of some stature, the woman has to get on top and do all of the work. That's my interpretation of it. Okay, mutton. Now, mutton is quite an interesting word because it obviously means old sheep. So you've got lamb and then you've got mutton, which is old sheep. And there's all sorts of stuff that goes on with mutton. Mutton dressed as lamb, so an older woman who is pretending that she's younger. And here we have in her mutton, i.e. having carnal knowledge of a woman. Relish. Now this is quite interesting because this has a really quite an interesting history, whereby relish used to mean something that was of interest rather than something that you relished or that you really, really wanted. So something of interest. And then it became embellished into something that was important enough for you to want it. And then it became something that was a chutney. So carnal connection with a woman is a relish. Okay, Roger. So again, in the UK, this is a 1970s slang. So Roger is to have sex, and you've got all this nonsense about Roger the lodger. So here we have, interestingly, to bull or lie with a woman from the name of Roger being frequently given to a bull. I didn't know bulls were called Roger. It's really odd that they would. Anyway, supposedly there's this idea of male prowess going on here with the bull. And this is a limerick, and I don't know if you guys are I don't know if you guys really understand limericks, but they obviously come from Ireland, and they come from, oh, good, Randy, hurrah. They have got a specific structure to them, and they have this thing that's going on at the beginning, which is basically setting up an idea, and then the last line gives you a sort of sting in the tail about what's actually going on. Now, I spent some time today looking at this because I couldn't understand why this is an Irish limerick, and they were talking about Cape Cod, and I was like, is there a Cape Cod in Ireland? No, there isn't.
No, they landed in Cape Cod.
Yeah, I know. I understand that, but I didn't understand why we would have this kind of limerick going on here where we talk about Cape Cod, because that would have taken them some time to get back to us. Anyway, as it happens, all over Ireland they've got lots of fish and chip shops called Cape Cod.
No.
Yeah, honestly. So anyway, there was a young girl of Cape Cod. So this is the cadence of it. You have to go with the syllables. There was a young girl of Cape Cod who thought all babies came from God. But 'twas not the Almighty who lifted her nighty, but Roger the lodger the sod. Okay, pulley hawley, strange old word there. To have a game at pulley hawley, to romp with women. Okay, so these are other things about carnal knowledge. To tup, to have carnal knowledge of a woman. Strapping, lying with a woman, again that's cant. To swive, obviously that's old English there, swive. We can see the words there. Swive to copulate, rantum scantum, playing at rantum scantum, making the beast with two backs. So what they've got here is a correlation of this strange nursery rhyme thing and Othello. And then Moll Peatley's gig, again probably somebody contemporary, not somebody that we know about. A rogering bout, so a rogering going on there. Okay, right, so I'm not going to go on to booze, so because that's a long one. I'll just give you a bit for like part 2. So the British have a kind of relationship with alcohol that you might see here. And I'll just allow you to have a look at all these words that are in proper common parlance with the British. You could say any of this to any British person and they would know exactly what you meant.
Still now.
Yeah.
Wanker.
Yeah, okay, I'm glad they've crossed the pond, or the pond has crossed over back to us, I'm not sure. But anyway, so the next time that we meet, when Kit can slip me in, so to speak, I'll do a bit of drunkenness, we'll do a bit of prostitution, a bit of venereal disease, and Roger's your uncle. So there you go. So I'll leave it there for now, fellas.
I'm of course going to make a comment and not ask a question.
Okay, Fran. I'm a bit scared.
There was, he's dead now, a famous comedian called Barry Humphries who dressed
Dame Edna,
as
yeah.
Dame Edna Everidge, and her Dame Edna's bridesmaid was named Madge, because in Australia a Madge is like a homosexual's handbag, but of a female version. So instead of saying this is my best friend, people would say it's Mary and her Madge.
Oh, well that could
Which means her
answer.
female partner.
Okay.
And like that comes back from the 1920s shearers and things.
Oh, thank you, Fran. That could answer a conundrum or two. Thank you for a bit of Australian knowledge. Always good.
And we have John over here.
Over here.
Oh no, John's first.
You didn't mention the F-bomb, and I've heard various interpretations of it's an acronym. Can you illuminate anything on that? When did it start becoming in use, vulgar?
To be honest, I can't tell you any more than it's used quite a bit by the Brits and in many guises. But I'll have a look and get back to that one. But no, it's so much part of the common parlance. It hasn't even occurred to me to look at how long ago it began. So it's just so much part of our stuff, I suppose. Hazel?
It comes from the Scottish Gaelic.
Oh, there you go.
It's a farmer can go and fuck his field. He's sowing his seed in the field.
There you go. All you need is a Hazel.
That explains why the Irish use it so much. All right. Well, come on. There's got to be more questions. Sasha's getting off.
Do you have anything on the source of the term limerick for that 5-line prose?
I do actually. So Limerick is a place in Ireland, and the Irish are very famous for what it might be called kissing the Blarney Stone, or having a lot of chat about stuff. And historically, that has meant that people have undermined the Irish because they spend so much time talking and joking with one another that they don't get work done. So there is this kind of strange thing between the English and the Scottish, not so much the Welsh, but the English and Scottish and the Irish, whereby the Irish are considered to be lazy and also a bit dim, which is weird because actually their ability, their use of language is most extraordinary, and their quick wit, and you can see that in their writing, and you can see that also in their music. So the Irish are probably the most musical of all of the 4 countries in the United Kingdom. They're the most musical. And so this idea of the limerick has a sort of cadence, a beat to it that is quite musical. Unlike the haiku in Japanese, which is So it's very lyrical. But it began in Limerick, and it has spread all over the place. And I think limericks, you can see them in quite a few parts in Europe now, that people compose a limerick of some fun. My favourite one is there was an old lady from China who went for a trip on a liner. She fell on the deck and twisted her neck, and now she can see from behind her. So quite a good one for shipfaring people such as we.
You've got one here.
And I've got a good limerick for you too. There was a young lady from Thrace whose corset grew too tight to lace. Her mother said, "Nellie, there's more in your belly than ever went through your face." But I did take some notes. What a merkin is from is they had so much trouble with lice and other things, they would shave the hair. They didn't want to be bare, so they had a merkin to cover up.
How times change.
Yeah, indeed. And we used muff and knock up.
Oh, knock up actually to make pregnant. Yes. Yeah.
So,
Morning.
so yes, if you ever want any, do the Americans use this? Yes, I can go through your list and tell you all about that.
Randy, I've had some offers tonight, but that's the best one. Okay.
Any more questions?
Any more answers? I mean, you gotta have more limericks than that.
The answer's 42, meaning blind. That's all we have to remember.
Good job, Jill. Lovely.
Thank you.
Is it too late? I've always heard that FUCK was fornicating under carnal knowledge.
That's not it.
That's a good idea, Sherry.
I don't know.
I know. It sounds good to me, but it could be a modern interpretation.
John says it's under consent of the king. Hey,
Fucking hell.
what was it, the crying game?
Well, that's about somebody putting their hands down at somebody's pants and finding that they thought they were sleeping with a woman and it ended up being a bloke, isn't it? Sorry to spoil the plot.
Is it?
It was about more than that.
Yeah, there's a lot more than that. Yeah. But it was Irish, and fuck was every third word.
Yep.
That's how I knew it was Irish.
Right. Well, thanks for your patience, people.
Yep.